I'm Mr. Black, this is Beyond Creepy, and in this video I'm going to be discussing the Hodgston entity. This case was investigated by Elliot O'Donnell. While there is no exact date for when this incident occurred, I have to assume, using O'Donnell's own time frame as an investigator, that it was sometime in either the late 1800s or early 1900s. It is unlike any case I have ever heard before. A Quaker family, the Bormans, consisting of Mr. and Mrs. Borman, their 3 daughters, a young servant girl named Elizabeth Harris, and a family friend, Mrs. Hummerstone, had gathered at the Bormans' hillside home on the outskirts of Hodgston in Hertfordshire one autumn evening. At some point, everybody had left for their rooms, while Mrs. Borman and Mrs. Hummerstone remained in the parlor, seated by the fire talking. Soon they heard a loud commotion coming from the kitchen area. Mrs. Hummerstone, who was seated nearest to the door, was the first to get up and check. As she entered the kitchen, she observed Elizabeth, the servant girl, pushing against the back door, attempting to stop an intruder who was trying to enter the home. Elizabeth notified Hummerstone that it was Tom Simmons, and that he had a knife, and that he was threatening to kill her. 18-year-old Simmons was no stranger to the family. He had previously worked for the Bormans as a handyman before being fired due to his unsatisfactory work ethic. During his time with the family, he had attempted to court young Elizabeth, though Mrs. Borman, sensing that something was off about Tom, recommended to Elizabeth that she not pursue the relationship, and Elizabeth heeded her advice and declined his efforts to see her. In the weeks following the dismissal, Tom had apparently told a few people around town that he had intended on getting even with Mrs. Borman and Elizabeth, and it seems he made good on his threat, arriving at their back door with a knife and an abundance of rage. He ceased trying to get in the back door, leaving Hummerstone and Elizabeth nervously wondering what he intended on doing next. It was then, to their horror, they heard a crash of glass in the back kitchen. They rushed over just in time to see Tom crawling in through the window. Mrs. Hummerstone rushed towards him, pleading for him to leave. She would be the first to die. Tom stabbed her in the throat. Everyone except for Mr. Borman, who was in another room, unaware of what was going on, had rushed to the kitchen before attempting to rush out of the house. Tom managed to grab the eldest Borman daughter and stabbed her to death, before turning and stabbing both Mrs. Borman and Elizabeth. It was at this moment something very strange happened. For no apparent reason, Tom dropped the weapon, screamed in absolute terror, and then took off running out the back door into the night. Mrs. Borman and Elizabeth, both of whom survived their injuries, recalled hearing Tom's footsteps as he raced across the cobblestone yard and along the road into town. Tom was found some time later by the police hiding in a barn. He was too terrified to offer any resistance. He was tried and sentenced to death. Before his execution, Simmons related to the chaplain a rather bizarre story. He claims that he was about to stab Elizabeth. He was going to finish her off. He said he felt something like icy cold touch him on his shoulder. He turned around to see what it was and came face to face with this dark creature. He said it was had a dark body, dark wings, and he claimed that it had a human-like body, but it wasn't human, and a human-like face. He said that it appeared to be frowning at him, as if it was unhappy with him. The sight of this thing frightened him so badly that he took off running and dropped the knife, took off running, and he said that this thing followed him out of the house, down the road. He eventually made his way to a barn. He said this thing followed him to the barn, whereupon he lost consciousness and was later apprehended by the police. Elliot O'Donnell, a former police officer, author, and avid ghost hunter, traveled to Hodgston to investigate the case. According to him, Tom's description of seeing a dark-winged, human-like entity the evening of the murders sparked interest in the community as numerous other people came forward, claiming to have also seen the same winged entity. In one instance, a man claimed that he was about to commit suicide when the strange entity appeared to him, apparently trying to dissuade him from following through on the act. The encounter completely changed the man who, according to Elliot, was in the process of turning his life around and no longer had thoughts of suicide.
This thing, it sounds like a guardian angel type story, but most guardian angel stories I've read, and I've read a lot, generally they're described as white robed, white wings, beautiful. Or they're described as human-like, like a regular person you would see on the street. This entity that Tom described almost sounds like a demon, a dark-winged entity that frightened him. And that's why I have to admit I've never heard of a demon intervening to help people. So this is a first for me. I'm sure other people will have heard of other types of cases, but I haven't.